All right, guys, we are back again for the Pat Stedman podcast interview series. And today we have Oscar Adrian, relationship coach and breakup specialist. I've been really excited about Oscar's stuff. A few months ago, I jumped on a Spaces with Taylor Burrows, and Oscar was in there. And I was like, man, who's this guy who's like, he's really, really smart, really understands a lot of this stuff. And I checked out his bio and I thought, oh yeah, he does this. He does this stuff too. So that makes a lot of sense. And ever since then, Oscar's been on my radar. I've wanted to have him on here. So good to have you here, Oscar. And tell us a little bit about what you do and how you got into this. I mean, especially breakup specialists. Very interesting.
Happy to be here, Pat. Thank you for that great introduction. That was a great space. I loved that space, having you, like being with you and her on the space, even with the technical difficulties in the beginning. But I resonate a lot with what you and Taylor Burrs, talks about. So, well, first of all, I got into this. There's two stories, and I'm gonna try not to go too deep into them, but there's two main reasons why I got into this, and well, three, but there's two stories. The first one was, when I was younger, I was not that good, with women, the typical story. And I did have girlfriends, in high school and college, but honestly, I didn't really know how I got them, at least not the first two. And so when that inevitable breakup came along, because we were too young and we really didn't know what we were doing, I felt, the pain of the breakup. But even then, I think that I still hadn't gotten to a point where, and I'll talk about this later on, I still haven't gotten to the point where there was this chronic, what I call highlight reel of the relationship. Because being that young, I think I was just having relationships for the sake of having them, right? Like I only had a girlfriend, but I couldn't see past that. And that's something I'll talk about later on. But having gone through that pain, later on there were two things that really marked my life, and one was that back in October 2008, actually on Halloween, one of my best friends killed himself.
Mhm.
And he had had some rough years. His mom had died of cancer. He had dropped out of college. When I first met him, he was actually on that hiatus between college, between dropping out and going back to college, actually. And we worked together and we hit it off instantaneously. And a year later, because I went to the States for a summer internship, that's where I met him, came back to Mexico, then went back, the next summer for another internship. I called him up and he was back in college. He was doing really well. He had met this um, woman that he was now dating in college. And the funny thing about all of this was that even though he sounded very happy, his plans had changed. And so when I first met him, he wanted to be a big stockbroker on Wall Street. He was actually, starting to do that. And he was majoring in finance and minoring, I don't remember exactly what he was minoring in. And now when he talked about her, he was talking about their future and how he was going to go back to, I think it was Alabama, and help her run the family ranch. And I thought that was very interesting. But he seemed so happy that I was like, okay, awesome, man. That's great to hear. Unfortunately, a few months later, they broke up, and he kind of went on the downward spiral.
And she broke up
And
with him, I take
yeah,
it.
she
And it was
broke up
kind
with
of
him.
and it was kind of like a blind side sort of thing.
That's what he told us. Yeah, I wasn't living in the same city anymore, so I would call him now and then. And back then, the only thing that was available was Facebook,
Mhm,
and so every now and then we wrote on each other's wall. But
mhm.
this was 2008, so he told me that he was blindsided and he went a downward spiral. He wanted to get back with her, he couldn't. She wouldn't take him back. And one day, October 31st, one of his roommates, which is also a friend of mine, just found him.
Mhm.
And that morning I woke up with 15, 16 calls at 7 a.m. in the morning already. Now I thought it was very weird. So when they told me the news, of course, that's something that I'll never forget. And immediately, the first thing that goes through your mind is, man, I wish I could have done more. Mark was a great guy. He was always, making us all laugh and stuff. He had a lot to give. But the second thing that came to my mind immediately was a list of other friends that I knew that I feared could potentially do the same thing.
Hmm.
Guys that in the outside they seem really well, but they either did not have the confidence to go up to a girl and try to talk to her, or they weren't really that good in relationships, or they even hadn't had relationships. And this was already college, right? We're already 2021. Like some of us had already had 2 3 relationships, and so a list of them came up.
Hmm.
And that's right then and there when I said, you know what, like I'm not going to let this happen again. And that kind of started me on this journey of like talking a little bit more with my friends, seeing how they were doing, and talking, being there for them mostly, when I saw that they were not. Because back then, I don't know if it was the social media craze or it was the our age, but a lot of people were posting a lot of their like their inner thoughts on
Yeah.
Facebook and sometimes even on Twitter. So I
Yeah.
kind of.
I think a lot, just I don't have to interrupt your train of thought, but one of the things I noticed, because I know Twitter, that was like a really big thing a while ago. You can find all sorts of bizarre posts from like celebrities, and I think it was this transition between, okay, now you had social media, but people not sort of realizing, like, you felt like you could share whatever you wanted online, people not kind of realizing the privacy implications of that. I think now there's much more of a people have much more awareness of it, and there's much more of a, image presentation that people bring to it. But anyway, I thought that was an interesting comment that you made, because people did used to just kind of like dump anything on there. If we look back at it, like in an open relationship with, like, what the fuck? Like, why are you putting that on? And I think I did that at one point too with my first girlfriend. We were going through some problems. Oh my God. It's like so embarrassing to think about. But sorry, continue with your story.
Yeah, no, don't worry about it. I mean, we were, 2021. We're the pioneers, back then of like the social media users.
Hmm.
So yeah, a lot of people were. I think that a lot of people, and even today, there's a lot of people that just want attention. But I think that back then it was just we could not really envision, what we were doing and how that could affect us or not, in the future, because we just saw it as a communications tool. And
Hmm.
even I think 2008, like don't quote me on this, but I think like Messenger was not around. Like you only could write on the wall on somebody else's,
Mm.
on your wall or on somebody else's wall. So that was public. And anyway, so when I started seeing, friends or acquaintances that I had on social media write about, a dark, sad, nostalgic quote or whatever, I would start reaching out to them and kind of see what they were doing, right? And how they were doing with everything. And then a few years later, fueled by, and this is why I wanted to talk about how I didn't know how I got my girlfriend, my first couple of girlfriends, fueled by all of the media, books, music, movies, shows, etc. Right? Everything that you listen to, everything that you consume, because we're not what we eat, what we consume, right? And that's
Hmm.
all 5 senses. Um, I broke up with a girlfriend, and I was going to go to a semester abroad in Australia. And we broke up, and she told me straight up, you know what, I'm not going to stay here and see how you go to Australia and just leave me. I'm going to leave before you. So she ended up going to London. And I was in the semester abroad in Australia. She went to London. She already graduated, but she went to London just for a hiatus or like some sabbatical. I went to study to Australia. And, within the first 3 weeks, I got my knee broken. It was a meniscal tear. I had to
Mm.
have surgery. So my this big idea that I had about, learning how to surf, that was the main thing. I watched Point Break when I was younger. I had already envisioned, since I was younger, going to Bells Beach, learning how to surf, everything. And I couldn't. So, that got me into a depression. And all of a sudden I started seeing signs everywhere, like our favorite song or whatever. And reached out to her and said, you know what? Like, I think, once you're done there, once I'm done here, let's talk and see what happens back in Mexico. And she straight up said no. We had been talking very often up until that point. She stopped talking to me. And, like that just got me into a slight depression, finished Australia, came back to Mexico. And now being here, everything, reminds you of her because you're still living with your parents. You're still going to the same college. You're
Hmm.
still visiting the same places. And long story short, I decided to surprise her and, try to do this big romantic gestures in the movies. And I actually went to London.
Mm.
I decided to fly out to London to try and get her back. And of course, that didn't work. It didn't work out. I got there. She was living in with a boyfriend, which I didn't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, she didn't have any reason to tell me, right? So let's not get in, like, I'm not gonna get into that, and like badmouth it or anything. But I got her, and I got there, and she's like, I'm living with my boyfriend, so yeah, it's not gonna work out. And of course, that was my fault because I was the guy that thought, from the movies, TVs, whatever, that making this big romantic gesture was gonna get me the girl,
Hmm.
and that really doesn't happen as much in real life as it happens in the movies.
And you were doing what so many guys do, which is that they must craft their own kind of fantasy world that's existing. And it's like, if I do this or that action, then it's going to get me the outcome I'm looking for in the world that exists in my head, rather than, blocking out certain things and discrepancies in reality. Yeah.
Exactly. And I had whatever young guy does, and even some adult guys do, right? Like I put her on a pedestal. I thought that she was my only ticket, to happiness. Um, this was the first time, that's something that I mentioned earlier. This was the first time that I had actually envisioned my future with a woman.
Hmm.
And that's the whole thing. That's part of what I see in so many guys, and where I build this, you know theory that I have, that men and women we're completely. I mean, we're very different, right? Like let's not beat around the bush. We're different, and we're built different. And from the beginning, especially in Mexico, where it's a little bit more of a macho culture, we're still a little bit more old school. Um, at least my generation, we were still taught that men are supposed to provide and support the family, bring home the bacon, etc. And women from a young age, and even to this day, you have the abuelitas, have the grandmothers, the mothers, the aunties, and everyone like, hey, when are you getting married? Like, hey, do you have a boyfriend? Hey, this, hey, that. Like, that's the main goal, right? And at least what it's taught in the family. So one thing that I've realized talking to guys, with myself as well, and with clients, is that it's very different how, when a woman is, from a very young age, starts playing, the when starts playing like she's the bride and groom, or having a family, with adults and everything, and they're gonna take care of their babies. And at the same time, we're playing cops and robbers, we're playing cowboys and Indians, we're playing firefighters, Jedi's, whatever. And so we grow up. This is my theory. We grow up just focusing on what we want to become as adults, right? Whether a rock star, magician, firefighter, astronaut, whatever. And you really don't see that much, uh, that many guys, actually, that many boys, writing in their notebooks, like, oh, Oscar and Barbie forever, or whatever. And with girls and women, it's a little bit different. So by the time we are in high school or college, and we start having our first relationships, most of us don't really see past that relationship. It's like, oh, I got a girlfriend, but you really don't see what's that next step,
Hmm.
right? And with women, what I've seen is, with my friends, my cousins, family, whatever, is that they, from the beginning, from their very first relationship, most of them are thinking about, I'm gonna marry this guy, I'm gonna have kids with him, or to a degree, or at
Yeah.
least they think 1, 2 steps ahead than us. So once we get to college, or after college, we graduate, we get our first couple of jobs, and we start, finally realizing, hey, like, there's much more to our relationship than just being boyfriend and girlfriend. I You either get it, from yourself or from society. Start thinking about, well, I might want to marry this girl, or start thinking, is this girl the right girl for me, to marry and have kids and whatnot. So what happened to me was, that was the first woman that I had ever envisioned myself in the future. And when I went there, and everything that happened, and basically she said no, and it didn't work out, that completely devastated me, and that completely shattered my world and the idea that I had of what was going to happen. So, having gone through that pain, that was the first time that I actually could understand my friend a little bit better, when it came to, okay, so now I actually had seen my future with her, and that was in my head already built up, and it's not going to happen anymore. And I started feeling that pain, and that helped me understand him and other guys and other friends that much more. And so that's where that kind of theory comes along, where the breakups that we have, usually in high school or in college, might not be that bad for us, but that very first one, and it doesn't matter what age it is, we can be 15, we can be 35, that very first breakup that we have, that's a major one where we had already envisioned the future with the woman that we're dating, whether it had been a month or a year, or 5 years or whatnot. That's the very first time that we feel that pain. And I don't think guys, we are, not that we're not equipped, but we're not taught how to handle that. Especially with the whole, we need to be strong, we need to be stoic, we don't talk about our feelings, we just need to move on. And sometimes even our friends don't help out with that, right? Because you can talk to a guy friend once or twice or three times about, hey man, I'm feeling really bad about the breakup. I'm feeling like I'm going into a depression or a black hole of, you know, despair or whatever. But after a while, it could be a month or 2 months, they're gonna be like, hey, like just get over her, right?
Mhm.
And so I don't think that really helps us. And I think it's very great that, now more than ever, we're talking about mental health issues with guys and, how we handle stuff and everything. But, that's basically, the whole gist of how I got to be, the breakup specialist, because I started, through that path of my friend having done that, then me having experienced it, and having had, another two big breakups since then. It's been like 10 years. I had another two big breakups. And, through going to therapy, reading certain books, following certain people, and actually taking some specific courses, I started sort of like building, a system for me to
Mhm.
be able to not go down a downward spiral, and be able to deal with a breakup that much more efficiently, but most importantly that much healthier.
Mhm.
Because you don't want to bring baggage into the next relationship. You want to have that done and close that chapter before you start writing the next one.
Yeah, this is a great topic, and I'm looking forward to diving more into it. I mean, I can't even tell you how relatable that is for my first breakup. Um, when this is like my high school girlfriend, although we dated halfway through my time in college. I was 2 years older than her. And, um, she's my first kiss, lost my virginity to her. Um, and she was a beautiful girl. She was definitely one of, I was somebody who traditionally was not all that cool. As throughout high school, I started to become cooler. I wasn't like, the very top echelon, but I got like, I got most changed since freshman year, for as in the graduating thing. So I had like a really good group of friends, and, did a lot of fun stuff. Um, I had upperclassmen appeal, I guess, right? But the thing is, she was a very attractive girl, and I definitely felt like she was out of my league. Um, so when we broke up, and all told, we were together for like 3.5 years, the last 2.5 years consistently. When that happened, like, our relationship was not at this point very good. Like, we were already, there was a lot of fights, a lot of frustration, lots of misunderstandings. I already had a couple near misses. Um, I think what was kind of keeping us together was, at this point, we were both going to be going to the same school because I had transferred. And I transferred to UPenn. She got into it. We were good. It was kind of like everything's on track for us to be together forever. And it didn't really matter the fact that our relationship was deteriorating so much, because I still had in my mind that, like, well, it was almost like this bizarre set of assumptions, like, well, obviously we're gonna be together, so I guess it doesn't matter if there's these problems, because it's like totally reverse engineered logic. And so when she broke up with me, it was like a paradigm collapse. Like, I honestly did not. It's not even like that I was mourning her so much, but it was like what I had. It was almost like I like my future was gone. It's kind of what it felt
Right.
like. Uh, so I don't know. It like all I could do at that time period is. I really buried myself into, studies. I took a lot of summer courses, self improvement, really put myself in situations to try to, like, grow and evolve and change, right? Like, I traveled by myself in North Africa. It was, but to your point, like, nobody could really tell me anything. Nobody did really tell me anything. Most people were like, "Oh, sorry about that," like, "Get over it." And I didn't know how to reestablish a sense of reality. So, is this kind of what you're talking about, what you see happen to a lot of guys, especially with the first person they really open their heart up to?
Yes, exactly. I know, and you were telling all that, and I could actually, envision myself back in high school again, because that, something similar happened to me. My first girlfriend that I got in high school, same thing like you, first kiss, and I'll be honest, she was the one that gave it to me. I
Mhm.
didn't even. She was the one that made the
Yeah,
move, right?
same deal, same deal. Yeah, yeah.
So, first kiss, lost my virginity, everything, and when we broke up, I I went through pain, but it was something that I realized later on that it was mostly because I had that uncertainty of I don't know how I got her,
Yeah.
and I don't know how if I'm ever gonna get another one, right? If I'm ever gonna be able to do that, because back then it's so funny. I had a similar story. I've always had academic scholarships, so I've always kind of been the nerd or the geek or something in school. And I mean, it was always easy for me, I'll be honest. But even in high school, I actually joined the football team, and that kind of also made me start, going up that social ladder. Problem was that was my first meniscal tear,
Mhm,
first in high school and
mhm.
then in Australia. So, I couldn't really get much further. But hey, I was getting better. My social skills were getting better, and I had a girlfriend. So she basically lasted for 5 semesters. I met her when I was in second semester in sophomore year. So the second part of sophomore year, and we dated, junior, senior, etc. And when we broke up, that was my main thing. Like I thought that it was because like that I wanted something more, but looking back on it, it was mainly because I didn't know if I was ever gonna get another girl to like me.
Mhm.
So that happened. Then the second one came along, and so on. But you know, the thing that I realized there and that helped me a lot was that for whatever reason, because I didn't do it consciously, but for whatever reason, uh, through the physical therapy that I was doing for my knee, I got really into the gym. So before, when I first joined the football team, like any other guy, like I thought I was invincible. I thought that nobody could touch me, and because I was defense, and I thought I had really good strength in my legs, so I didn't really do any leg work in the gym. After that happened, I started going to physical therapy, started focusing more in the gym to build my body up, and that helped me a lot because I had to go do that. The other thing was that through that physical therapy, I had to go to the swimming pool every single day. And so that was an outdoor swimming pool. And you don't realize this until later, but all of that vitamin D that I was doing, all of that exercise, the strength training and everything was just helping me. I could see my body changing,
Mhm.
but I didn't realize why my mind was also getting healthier and why my mindset was changing. And it's not until you realize, what vitamin D, sun, hormones, testosterone, everything. But that helped me out a lot deal with that. So that's one thing, and that's actually the first thing that I tell every single guy after their breakup is like, are you doing any kind of sports or any physical activity? No, go do it. Or yes, okay, are you doing strength training? No, go do that.
Mhm.
Go do something outdoors, get some sun, start walking, go the strength training route, because that I realized, that it helped me without me actually doing it on purpose. But that's the foundation, I think, of everything, because it helps with energy levels, testosterone, and everything. But through that, I discovered self-improvement when I was starting college. So I started reading Tony Robbins, started seeing Jim Rohn's
Mhm.
seminars and all of these other guys, and started reading all our books, and that really helped me. Along with, I actually had a very good, very close therapist that I saw. He was a family friend. He's now long gone. May he rest in peace. But he really understood where I was coming from. And the thing, though, that I loved was that him knowing my family, he kind of knew where a lot of my issues were coming from.
Mhm.
And to my parents, um they didn't like this, but he was telling me, even him as a psychologist, telling me like, go against what your parents are telling you in this and that issue, because that's not helping you.
Yeah.
That's helping them. So that really helped, like build my confidence up. And by the time, I started college, well, actually, by sophomore year in college, I felt that change. So, but yeah, the first time that I broke up, it was just, that it was just, what's the word that I'm looking for? It was just, I don't know, it kind of worked my life, and I saw what happened. And I didn't know this at the time, but of course I brought that baggage into the next relationship. That's why that didn't work in the beginning, and so on. And that's one thing that I noticed, and that's what I mentioned earlier, right? The whole thing, it's for you to not bring baggage from the past relationship into the new one, because a lot of the times, whether you realize it or not, we we adapt, we adapt to the things that happen to us.
Mhm.
And a lot of things that I see is, if a girl, let's put this extreme example, if a girl cheated on you, you're not going to have the same trust with the new girl that you actually had in the beginning with the last girl that did cheat on you, right? You're not, because you're not giving them the benefit of the doubt a lot of the times. So I think that the main thing is to realize, one, like, what one girl did, it's not what another one is going to do. What one woman did, it's not what's going to happen to you again. The same thing, like, not all men are equal. Like, we are not all the same.
Mhm.
But realizing and giving them that opportunity, and allowing yourself, because I think that's the more important thing, allowing yourself and giving yourself that opportunity to trust again, to start having feelings for another person, to start loving again, if that's the case. Because I think there's, in most guys that went through a big breakup, I think that's one thing that stays with us for a very long time. And just like that first love, we compare a lot of our relationships and what we feel to that, you know, first real love that we had. We also compare a lot of the behaviors and all of what's happening to that one big breakup that we had, and that, completely changed the way we see things. And one of the main reasons why I like doing this, and why I like helping guys, it's, yeah, I don't want them to do what my friend did, but it's because I don't want them to get jaded and want them to go to the extreme of, misogyny, or of not trusting, or, having this fake idea of what
Take
alphaness
the red
is.
pill. Take
Exactly. Yeah, I didn't want to say that, but yes, you know exactly what I mean. I don't want them to go that route,
Yeah.
because I think that in the long run, I think that hurts the man more than than it actually benefits them.
Yeah, it is really interesting about the benefits and the cons of the red pill. I mean, I think like any kind of medication, some people tolerate it better than others. I think for some people there's a lot of side effects. Others might have it and there's only minimal side effects, but it's you know, a lot of it really does poison a man's thinking. And I think one of the really crucial things about it is that it might give more insight into female behavior, but it doesn't allow broader contextual understanding of it. So it's
Yeah,
like you learn the truth about how women will behave in certain contexts. And of course, some women are more inclined to behave that way than others. Eh, Like, so you learn this like dark part of female psychology, but the one thing that's always bothered me about the red pill is it's never contextualized. It's never like, okay, this is at the very, very low substrate female nature, what they're possible to do, and women who are hurt or who are less developed are more likely to engage in this behavior. It's kind of like a trauma response. It's not ever presented like that. It's presented like this is the truth about women, you know, and if you don't understand it, you're done. It's like, all right,
yeah,
well, but if you do understand only that, you're also done because then you don't understand anything else, and you can't possibly effectively navigate that environment and actually get the kind of connection with women that you want. just kind of to your point, I don't think guys, because of their ego, and I think because it's very difficult for them to really, I think, fully understand their own feelings. But a lot of guys after a breakup, they don't realize the sort of, especially if it was like a bad breakup and they were blindsided, they don't understand how they hold on to so much pain around it. You know, guys who maybe like wallow in it and just, act like a victim, okay, well, that might be more in their forefront. But even guys who are like, yeah, I'm over it, blah, blah, blah. I find very often that they're not. And I can look at myself as a clear example of this because while I think I took some stuff with me from that first breakup, I didn't I didn't have that was more. I think my bigger takeaway was about me because I took, you know, responsibility for it. She had been a good girl. There was zero bad blood on my end towards her. Um, I kind of just felt like, okay, yeah, obviously my own kind of emotional issues and stuff got in the way. And frankly, I mean, we just weren't compatible really long term. I mean, that's just obvious. But my second girlfriend, which was about 2 years later, almost 2 years later, that, you know, I at this point I was really like I was in the game and we sort of gradually, like, it wasn't supposed to become something serious, but it became something serious
Yeah.
and it got really intense. And, you know, I had a lot of resistance to getting closer and closer to her. Now, I don't know, as I'm saying this right now, I don't know if some of that resistance had to do with the first, fear from the first relationship ending, or whether it had, because there was a lot of context stuff. There was a lot of, uncertainty about her in particular that may have led to that. Initially, we were together in college, but then I graduated, moved to Argentina. She wasn't there.
Nice.
I mean, about,
Okay.
I mean, it's just like, so we weren't together, but they're still talking. It was just total mess. And a lot of, if I'm just being totally candid, you know, sexual games, let's put it that way, that, we're not together. There's other people in the mix, but the thing is, there was all this kind of resistance, but then eventually I said, okay, I'm going to commit to this. Fine. I'm going to do it. And it wasn't that long before like the relationship started to deteriorate afterwards. And I was now, because I had actually committed, and then all sorts of other crap started to come into the picture, gaslighting, tons of trust was broken. So when this whole thing ended about like a year later, for good, I I I mean, I was really hurt by like this end of this relationship, but I was very strong. I wasn't in the first after the first relationship, I was really like kind of a bitch. I really was just so depressed. Whereas with this one, I was sad, but I didn't like rock my self-confidence. But I did the same thing. I really threw myself into work. I just threw my I think it's a very common pattern with guys, just to like throw yourself into something different, direct your energy a different direction. But I guess I give all this background context not to like bore people with my whole story here, but I s- I became like crazy single guy by the end of this, and I was dating tons and tons of girls, and I didn't realize, because this brings us up to like with my wife, who's like my third serious girlfriend. I didn't realize how afraid of commitment I was, because it was not in my conscious mind at all. I was positive, I was optimistic, I was like, I'm like, I'm okay with what happened, I don't have any issues with her, and I wanted to, you know, find love and get serious with the girl, but I was I was operating at like a superficial level of intimacy. because like I would control it. I would get the woman to become intimate with me, and then I'd feel like, okay, this was good, and I'd reveal kind of selective things, but I would never give myself to them. And I didn't, I almost blew things up with my wife because I was so afraid to jump in. I always had like a new rationale why I couldn't do it. And I swear it's because I didn't trust. I really
Okay.
didn't trust women, but it was so unconscious that I would never have said that. I would say, no, of course I trust women, but wasn't acting that way.
Yeah, I think that that last part that you were telling, it's very normal. Whenever, I mean, humans were designed that in a way where if we get hurt doing something, our mind completely remembers that, for a long time and tries to avoid it. It's sort of like when you're little and you go and actually like put your hand on something hot, you remember that for the rest of your life. Right? If you get bitten by a dog or it attacks you or you get burned with some fire or whatever, you keep that in your brain, your mind, and in your body, right? So you don't want to do that. Your mind tries to avoid you getting hurt again. And so the same thing happens with emotional scars. And it's completely normal for someone after they get hurt to start looking for a solution. And whether that solution is healthy or not, it doesn't matter. It at least in their heads, whatever they found, it's the solution in that moment. And if they're not, I think that if we're like us as guys, if we're not redirected a certain way, and humans in general, I think that if we're not redirected in a certain way or wouldn't question what we found right then and there, that leads us to a certain path. And this goes back to what we were mentioning, right, about red pill. I think that any kind of ideology or any kind of movement that's just black and white, it's not. I don't think it's healthy. That's
Mhm.
just my opinion, right? So to each their own. Not criticizing anyone, but at least in my experience, there are always shades of gray to something. If everything is black and white, maybe one or two things not, but other than that, if whatever it is that you're looking into, reading into, or getting yourself into, it's something that's completely black and white, then you really need to assess the situation and question why they're saying that it is black and white. So I think it is. I've always been a big proponent of finding balance, right? So yeah, let's say you had a relationship and by the end of it you became the bitch of the relationship, right? And like, I don't know, your woman was I don't know, abusing you in some way, right? Let's talk about a guy that a girl like physically, emotionally, or verbally abuses him. They end that relationship, and the very next one, they're not going to want to be in that extreme. They're probably going to want to go to the other extreme, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not saying that they might become also verbally, physically, or mentally abusive. They might, but at least their behavior, it's going to be somewhere where as soon as they see something that in this other one led them to be abused, they're going to get triggered and they're going to react some way,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
that might be a very bad thing. Even if it's just verbally saying something, screaming, or just every single time that you're about to get triggered, just storming out of the room. You're not really dealing with the actual problem. So I think that a lot of guys just either stay here or here, but they're not really, questioning or journaling or reflecting about how to get here because nobody is actually there to tell them, hey, it's not black and white. There are shades of gray where you can actually find the balance, whether it's right in the middle or here, but you don't have to be this or that. You can actually be, your own person. Because I think that there are certain things that are helpful, especially in the beginning about building your confidence, about certain things, in the red pill. But I think that if you dive completely into it, at least, in my experience, it's not good. It's not healthy. And that happens with all ideologies that, are either black or white or are about manipulating, other people.
Well,
So
ideologies give you comfort and projection. So, you have all sorts of certainty because the problems are all externalized.
Yeah, and they
So
also give you an identity and a brotherhood.
yes, yes, 100%, 100%, and it will simultaneously be built on superiority and victimhood at the same time, right? And you see that very much with the red pill, where you have guys who are feel like they're victims of women, and yet they think that they should get whatever they want from women, and it's you know, I mean, I think that the charitable and to be fair, I think fundamentally accurate because there's some people, there's some corners of the red pill that are extremely dogmatic, and there's others that are a lot more lighter touch, kind of like, hey, this is stuff that women do, which I think is less damaging, and I think that, but needs to be presented in its developmental context because a lot of what the red pill community is essentially adolescence. It's the male performative stage where the man needs to learn how to develop competence in different areas, and is really dealing with the woman at her adolescent stage. Like I've noticed this before. Like when I look at a lot of macro stuff, when I look at relationships across time, I see like, well, there's some red pill influence here on that you can see on the woman's behavior, but there's a lot of other stuff going on too. It's not sufficient. But when you look at like high school and even to a large extent college relationships, you're like, oh yeah, that's red pill. Like that's like real red pill shit because women are acting in a very predictably red pill way. It becomes less and less um comprehensive as time goes on because women evolve as time goes on. There's different, they start to develop their understanding of what they want. And I'm just gonna make, I don't want to necessarily stray too much into this, but just I I love to challenge this one assumption because one of the things that red pill guys really talk about is the epiphany phase, where a woman decides all of a sudden that she doesn't, want to ride the cock carousel and she wants to have something serious and meaningful with a guy. And one of the things that is so like it's just I find it amusing about this is that they view this entirely through some kind of lens like her sexual market values dropped, therefore now she wants to get like the beta. And while, I think that there's certain contexts where that might be true. All of her friends maybe get married and then she's by herself. So that one girl is then looking to try to grab somebody who, okay, maybe in those situations. But as a general kind of principles, that's just not like you could explain that behavior better from the fact that a girl dated and so if she was out in the big city for 2 years and she was going on dates and she was like, man, this is really fucking meaningless, going out to bars, getting shit faced, and maybe taking a guy home. Maybe I don't want to do that anymore. Maybe some behavior that she had when she was younger no longer gives the same payoff. I used to go play guns in my backyard when I was like 10. And I remember one time when I was 15, I had in my mind like, "Oh man, this would be fun to go do." So I went out, took like toy guns in the backyard. I was out there for like 5 minutes. I was like, "This sucks." It's like, this is not what I remembered it to be. I mean, why would like we do this throughout our entire life? We don't the same things that we did when we were younger. We might have a nostalgic impression of it. We go out and do it. It feels different because we're different. We've changed. And I find it so funny also that they'll make these same points that, she has the epiphany that she's got to go get, a beta because she can't get the alpha anymore. And then these guys will simultaneously say that women are so solipsistic that they have no conception for their declining value. That they always think that they're really hot and desirable way into their, late 30s and 40s, even when they've declined relative to the market. So it's like, so which is it? Did she have an epiphany that her value went down? Or, you know, or did she actually like it's just this inconsistent thinking because women don't seem to have that self-perception, certainly not on a conscious basis.
Yeah, I think. Sorry.
No, I was just ran over.
Yeah, I know you touched on a lot of points. I think that the thing with what you were mentioning about adolescence is that you can be in your 20s or 30s and still be in that
Stage.
emotionally mental adolescent stage,
Yes.
and you don't realize this. And the problem is that we tend to gauge things or measure things, by the easier part, right? Which would be, how old are you, or how old is her? But that doesn't really mean, or what do you do? What does she do? What, the body count or whatever. We don't really realize that you might be 40 and have like, as a guy, you might be 40 and be rich, and you're still in an adolescent stage mentally or emotionally, because you never really, got out of that. Same with women. I think that all humans have that problem where, we just see a 20 something very attractive woman, and we assume that because of X, Y, and Z, she's going to be ABC, right? But it doesn't really happen. Like, we don't really know up until we actually start meeting the person, knowing the person, dating them, being in that relationship with her, or trying to be in that relationship with her, where we realize, hey, you know what, like this, there's a reason why. There's a reason why she's not in a committed relationship, or she's had so many breakups or whatever. Same with guys. It happens to both of us. With the I think that a lot of what you mentioned, a lot of the red pill comes as a response to, like, extreme, what is it, the fourth wave now, to the
Mm-hmm.
extreme fourth wave of feminism. Because just like guys are being told by the red pill, hey, you know what, you need to be alpha. Hey, you know what, women are like this, and the only way to get one is to be like that. I think it's the same thing with a lot of women. And the problem with both men and women that fall prey of those kinds of ideologies and groups is that we're it's people that are not really that discerning to a degree, or that had a lot of trauma and they really didn't know how to deal with it. And the very first thing that worked for them was going again to what we are saying earlier, right? Like one of the extremes. So the thing is, to be a little bit more discerning and taking responsibility for what happens. That's a big thing with me. With me, a lot of the times, if not most of the times, when I get and talk to guys, they're either, again, they're either on one end of the extremes. They're either taking full responsibility, so blame, for what happened in the relationship, or they don't take any. And that's a very bad sign. Whatever happened in the relationship, as you were saying earlier, with your first girlfriend, we were just not compatible. Perfect. But a lot of the times when a guy comes to me and they just broke up, they either blame everything on themselves, or they blame everything on the
Yeah.
woman.
Yeah.
And the thing that I've seen with red pill is that there's not a lot of responsibility being taken, even if it's talked about at the surface level. I think that there's not really that much, because the responsibility that's talked about is, well, you need to work out, you need to make money, you need to do this, and that way you become like the top dog. And that's not really true. I mean, you can be the fittest, strongest, most aesthetically looking guy that's making $1 million a month, and you still might not be that alpha, or might not be that much of a catch, because emotionally or mentally you're not that well developed, right? And so you're going to get triggered very easily, or you're not going to really commit, or you're not going to really know what to do in a more serious relationship stage. And the very first thing, like this is something that also happened to me. The first 7 girlfriends that I had, coming back to the first one in high school, and the first 7 girlfriends that I had, everything ended up in a breakup, whether I broke up or they broke up with me, or whatever happened. And it took me that long. I started dating, that was 2003, so it took me up until 2015 or 16, with that 7th one, where I had to sit down and say, okay, so the common denominator in all of my relationships has been me. Let's see what's going on, right? And this was with the help of a therapist and everything. And long story short, I came to realization that whatever happened, I had a pattern, and I was choosing fundamentally the same kind of girl, in terms of every single relationship that I had been with a woman that had very serious father issues.
Mm.
A couple of them never knew the dad. A couple of them, like one of them, was actually abandoned by the dad, even though he was living in the same city. And stuff like that. And a few of them were actually, like that last child from like the second or third marriage. The dad was like 60 years old. When they had her, when he had her. So like they had some like those kinds of issues. And so it took me that long and a very, a lot of sessions and a lot of self-reflecting moments, journaling, meditating, everything, and therapy sessions to come up to the realization that every single one of them had that. Like I
Mm.
couldn't even say, well, what? No, all of them had that. So at that moment, that's on me. Like I was the one that was choosing to have a long-term, serious, committed relationship with them. And it's not something, that all of a sudden appeared in the middle of a relationship. Is like you already know that from the beginning, because in the dating part, the dating stage, you're talking and you ask about the family, especially in Mexico. We're still living with our parents, uh, even in our young adulthood. So like the family and what's going on. And that was still me, choosing. Even one time with one relationship, one of the women told me, I've never really been on a serious relationship before. So I've never really had to be, faithful, because I've never been in a committed relationship. And I
Mhm.
was still the guy, back then, that said, don't worry about it, we'll make it work. And of course, she's already telling you, right? She's already telling me, like, I've never had to be faithful because I've never been in a committed relationship. So what happened? She wasn't faithful,
Right.
right? And I
Right.
could put it all on her and say, well, she's a bad person, this and that, whatever. It was on me because she told me from the beginning, and I chose to ignore that.
So this is so interesting because I feel like women do that all the time. I feel like they always tell you before they're gonna do it. They'll warn you. They'll say, it's like, I don't know how to commit. I have intimacy issues. I've cheated in the past. Like, and guys are like, no, I can save her. Like it's gonna be different with me.
White knight syndrome.
And it's like the girl, it's almost like that famous poem about, a snake, like trying to like God, what is it? Carious, like, is this guy, it's some like animal parable where some animal carries a snake across the river, and then the snake bites it in the middle.
Scorpion.
It's a scorpion, yeah.
The
I'm mixing up
scorpion
two
stings.
parables. Like, I'm mixing up the "you knew I was a snake before I let you in" and the scorpion one. Yeah, yeah, the scorpion one. So they're on, and it bites them, and then they both drown. Basically, it's like, well, why would you do that? It's like, but it told you, you knew what it was when you decided to take it on, and very apparent. They're very open about it. Um, but yeah, it's like, I think it really speaks. Like, this is one of the things with white knight syndrome, is that white knight, like, mindset is so selfless, but it's really so egotistical and self-centered. Because it's like, I can't, it's either like, I can't break up with her because she won't be able to recover from it. It's like, get over yourself. Get over yourself. She'll survive without you. Or, if I don't tolerate all this terrible stuff from her, then, you know, what's she gonna do? Like, I can save her. If I don't help her, nobody's gonna help her. It's like, really,
But I think
yeah.
I think that a lot of the white knight syndrome also comes from a rooted lack of confidence on guys, because what I've seen a lot of the times is that, you're already in a relationship, right? And yeah, you might want to save her, and you might be egotistical enough, to believe that you're going to be the one to change her or save her or whatever. Same thing with women and guys, right? Like they might think, oh, I'm going to change this bad boy. Why do I keep dating jerks? Because you keep thinking that you're going to be the exception and that they're going to change for you,
Mhm.
right? So it's the same thing with us. It's the same thing with both sides of the coin. But it's because we're too egotistical and we think that's going to happen. But I think with guys especially also, it's a matter of, well, I'm already in a relationship and I don't know if I might get someone that's as good, as beautiful, as attractive, as whatever as
Mhm.
her, you know. And that's that's one of the things that I really think has to do with white knight syndrome. It's not just about us wanting to save them, because it is rooted in our, in parables, fables, stories from generations, from civilizations from thousands of years ago, about the hero, the white knight, the warrior, whatever. But it's also about us fearing that we might not feel the way we feel with another woman as we do with them. And I
Mhm.
think all that speaks a lot back to, going back a little bit, to the emotional adolescence that we're going through, wherein, whether we realize it or not, we're thriving on drama.
Mhm.
And nobody that I don't think there's ever a guy that's gonna say, like, realistically, oh yes, I love drama, I'm always trying to get, no, but you're still looking for it, whether you realize it or not. And that's why you keep getting into those kinds of relationships. I think that when a guy is confident enough in himself, in his life, what he's going on for him, his skills and everything, it becomes a little bit easier to deal with those kinds of situations. Because if what you're bringing to the table and what she's bringing to the table, you're not seeing that it's, at least in your head, and what you might want her to bring, it's not being equal, or you're not, you know you're not both putting up the end of your deal, putting up with your end of the deal. Then it becomes easier to discern what's happening, and either, have a very serious talk with the girl or the woman that you're dating, depending on the age you're at, right? uh, or just go straight and say, what, like, this is not working for me. And what that's that happened to me once with this woman that I was talking about, that she told me, what, I've never had been faithful before. So there was a situation where I really wasn't sure, there really wasn't, I couldn't say, oh, I caught her in the act, right? But there was a lot of suspicion. She would openly tell me, some stuff. And so I got to a point where I'm like, what, like, this is not working for me. I think we should just go our own ways. And she tried, to, like, logically explain, well, but I'm because she was in college, I was already out of college. Well, he's just my study partner, and we need to do this exam or this project or whatever. And I'm like, what? I'm not saying, I'm not accusing you of anything. I'm not saying that you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong. The thing that I'm saying is, and this is something that a lot of guys don't do, is I'm not comfortable with the way things are, and I'm not going to stay here and try and figure out, whether it's in a month, a year, or 10 years, if I'm right or wrong about what I'm thinking and what I'm actually, hearing from you. So I think it's better if we just go our own ways. That way, you're free to do whatever you want. And I don't have to be sitting here, thinking, or, worrying about what you might or might not do one day at night.
Mhm.
So a lot of guys just would rather stay there and go, like, either get into the drama and get into a huge fight, and not break up in the end, or break up very badly, where it's screaming and whatnot, or just stay because they're not confident enough they might get another, woman that might make them feel that way. And I have to be honest with this time, like, in my case, it was a matter of, she was a very attractive woman, and I was getting, that weird part where you're getting compliments from all your friends, like, dude, like, you're very lucky, like,
Yeah, yeah.
basically telling, like, you, yeah, your girl's very hot, right? So she's out of your league, how do you get her? But it came to a point where I'm like, what, I don't care if she's hot or not, I don't care if she's out of my league or not. Like, I'm just not comfortable because of my own principles and the way and what I want for, my life and my relationship to be long term. So I'm just not comfortable with this, and I'm confident enough that I will, find a more suitable partner down the line, because she's just not it right now. So I think that a lot of guys, get stuck in that either drama, white knight syndrome, or just not have the confidence to say, I will be okay.
Yeah, and I think what you said, I mean, that is an indication that a man has a sense of self-worth, rather than trying to, 'cause what you said I think is really profound, because guys are trying to get to the truth about whether or not, "Oh, did she cheat?" "Does she like this guy?" And after the first warning with the situation, I mean, certainly by the 3rd strike, like, there's nothing else to talk about here. It doesn't matter whether it happened or not. What matters is that there's a pattern of behavior that's opening the door to something. And on a long enough timeline, it is almost inevitable that it would happen if it hadn't happened already. And there's no, it's kind of like people play these kind of legalistic games. Well, I didn't do it. I didn't actually do it. I didn't actually do it. It's like, well, it doesn't matter because I don't want to live in that ambiguity because that's a drain of my energy to be in the ambiguity. You can't seem to, I'm not saying you have to say this, that's like maybe too combative or anything, but when a girl is leaving the door open like that, she likes the attention she's getting from this other guy. Even if she doesn't necessarily want to do anything else with him, she certainly likes the fact that you're a little bit jealous, courting all this stuff, or at least she can't help herself. And there's no reason to put yourself in that situation unless you like to lose your energy, unless you like drama, as you said, right?
Yeah.
Now, one thing I wanted to ask you, because you are the breakup specialist. So, first off, how do how do men and women break up? Do they break up differently? Because this is kind of go back to a lot of the red pill stuff. This is a major kind of gripe that men are the real romantics and women end things and women don't care, or after they end it, they just might as well have been done. What's your perspective on that? And just talk about the difference between the sexes when it comes to breakups.
Well, that's a great question. You know, it I think there can be similarities, and that has to do a lot of with the emotional maturity that each person has. Because both sexes can actually start doing things that annoy the other person because they don't want to be the one that breaks up, right? They want the other person to break up. So a lot of the times, I've seen both guys and girls just start doing stuff that will trigger the other person, or pushing those buttons so that eventually, a big fight ensues. And then, that's the perfect excuse to just say, hey, let's each go our own way. I think that as much as we want to portray women, as the more emotional ones, I think that it's really them that can be a little bit more straightforward with the breakup than guys. I think guys are a little bit more, and I'm talking both, let's call a baseline of normality, right? And certain emotional maturity. I think that guys are a little bit more on the, well, I don't want to hurt her. So I think guys, and I'm saying this is a good thing, but I think guys are mostly the ones that will try and come up with some lame, weird excuse. The whole thing, it's not you, it's me, or I'm just too busy at work, or I'm whatever it is. I think that we still have that kind of like protector vibe and that protector mentality where we really don't want to hurt the other person. We really don't want to hurt the woman that we're dating. Because I mean, if you're dating, there's at least some feelings, right? There's at least something. If you date it for long enough, there's at least some feelings that have been developed between the two. And
Mhm.
I don't think that you really want to hurt the other person. But I think guys had a little bit more. I think that guys beat around the bush a lot more than women. I think that women are more of a, I'm thinking of breaking up with him, and they don't do it right away. Like they let it, sit for a week, a month, or two, and by the time they're like breaking up with you, they've been thinking about it for
Mhm.
a long time. It's not something that just happened right then and there, unless there was a big thing, right? Some kind of abuse, some kind of cheating or whatever. Then yeah, that can be just one, 0 to 100, 0 to 100 in a second. But when it's not something like that, I think that it's just something that has been being built up for a long time. As with guys, I think that even though that can be the same as well, I think that for us it's a little bit more of, we realize something in the moment, or we saw something change, or even, hey, we realize that we're actually attracted to another woman, and we're not, having the same feelings with the girl that we're with, and we're just saying, what, like I want to see what happens instead of just cheating, which I'm not saying it's good, but I think that with guys, it's a little bit, we don't think about it that much. We don't think about the reason that much, but we think more about the way we want to break up and not hurt the woman. As with the woman, it's more about, they think about the reason a lot more, and the way it just comes out can be, just something that they thought of right then and there.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting how guys, even in, the enlightened 2020s, have this instinct to make sure that the woman is kind of let down easy. And I don't think that you see that very often with women. There are certainly some women who are real, you know, hard on their sleeve kind of girls who will kind of keep the channel open for the guy, but they are not your typical woman. Your typical woman, when she's broken up with a guy, like, he's lucky if he kind of has one follow-up conversation with her to, process this stuff. And eh, she's usually, if she gives that, she's like super impatient about it. Like checking the clock, like, all right, I've been really good to you that I even am listening to you care, like your emotions. Whereas guys, like, it's so much more uncommon to have a guy just be totally callous, like, I don't care, blocking her number, done with her. I've known guys to, like, pay rent for the girls for months afterwards, like, you never see that stuff reciprocated in the other direction. And it must be some, like, I do think that there's some sort of deep biological element with it where a guy feels like, it's like residuals of this sort of white knight savior complex that, even if they're making the right decision, it's kind of like, I got to give her something just so that I make sure she's not destitute if I'm going my own direction. It's like, it's like you got a wife, you're gonna get your next wife. Like, I got to make sure the first wife still has a little bit of something to have her taken care of. Whereas when a woman leaves a man, it's like you're not biologically worth anything.
You're cut off. You're cut off completely. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you might as well, you're you're bio-refuse right now because I am a woman and I'm nature and I've rejected you. Um, so, go on and make yourself better, but don't do it around me because but I think to your point, women will usually process a breakup while they're still in the relationship. So I feel like a man pulls the trigger and then there's this sort of drawn out process afterwards where he's trying to let the woman down, but the woman, it's almost like women don't usually pull the plug until they're really certain, um, or, they have a good jump off point, another guy to go to. I think it's really rare to see a woman, like, unless, as you said, there's been some kind of acute circumstance, very rare to see her pull the plug on the relationship without having kind of processed the end of the relationship for a long period of time, unless she's really got like another guy who's presenting a better option for her.
Yeah, or gauging. They're always gauging the pros and cons. If we look at it, let's say if we look at it as uh, a sand, if we look at it as a sand clog, I think that when women know exactly when they are turning, the sand clog and start seeing that relationship, when they actually start thinking about it, it's like they're turning the sand clog and they start seeing that sand going through the little hole, and they're just basically gauging time and time again what's happening. As I think that with us, with guys, is like we don't realize that we're actually gonna break up or something until that little sand, it's already everything, it's already down in the bottom part.
Yeah.
I think that we won't really realize it, and things could be going bad for a while, but even then we're not really conscious of that until it's been long enough so that we realize, like, oh wait, this is happening, or this happened, and now all of a sudden we're not the same. I mean, we're not the same person. We don't have the same goals. We don't have the same days. Or you actually realize that you never actually had them.
Hmm.
And that is one thing where when after a guy has been through a breakup, and we work together and everything, it's before they start going into the next relationship. And this is a big tip for everyone, whether you've been through a breakup or not, or this is going to be your first relationship. I think that instead of you waiting until you realize that you guys are not compatible because something happened, I think the best thing that you can do is, and I teach this a lot, is make sure that your goal, make sure that you have an aligned vision for the future, most of all, and you have at least some fundamental values so that that you guys are aligned in those two. Because I think that a lot of the times as men, like until that little sand clog, like, just completely runs out and we realize, oh my God, we wanted different things. Oh my God, we had different values, or we had different assumptions, right? When instead, in the beginning, if you talk about it from the very get go, when you're dating, like what's your vision for the future? What are your goals? Like, what are the, 3, 5 principles that live by? You start having a better idea of how those kinds of situations, whether it's the breakup itself or some major problem that arises, how you guys are going to handle that. And that's something that not a lot of people talk about. There's yeah, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I mean, I think people will talk about like the importance of values, but they don't really explain why it's so important. And relationships over time, you're always gonna hit hard patches, either from external circumstances, stress gets put on the relationship. You know, you guys were mutually validating each other in the beginning. You get to a point, you become semi codependent, things become stale, and it's at these points there's always going to be some tension and desire to end the relationship. And if you don't like, it's at these points that it's shared values that anchor you together and actually force you to go through this differentiation process where your relationship, you grow through the relationship and the relationship improves and expands, and you're able to stay together while growing together. You need to have something that anchors the two of you together during that, because it's very, very chaotic and can be scary, because a lot of what allows the relationship to improve and deepen is a sense of you leaving each other and leaving because you're leaving the pattern, you're leaving the codependent pattern you created, these triggers. And so you no longer in some ways need the other person. And then, so what keeps you together in those moments? If you have totally different values and you hit those roadblocks, you're going different directions.
Yeah.
It's very unlikely, because now you're like, I'm doing now what I want to do, and which was, by the way, never what you wanted to do. Wow, we're both our own people and we're going totally different directions now, because this is so, yeah, the values is super, super important. I could not agree more with that. I just wanted to add that in there. Please continue.
Oh, no worries. Yeah, and in the end, you can tell a lot about a person and how things might progress or end just by those same values, right? And once I started once I started realizing that and I started applying that to my own relationships, a lot of things changed. Plus that realization of the father issues. Uh, for example, for me, my main values for me, just as a guy, but also in a relationship, it's respect, communication, fidelity, loyalty, and also, it's a weird thing, but like evolution. And by evolution, I mean that if we need to keep growing, right? We can't stay the same people. We need to be improving ourselves in whatever way possible, right? It's not like, I don't know, like I need to become a better person. I need to keep learning. I need to keep educating. I need to keep, not, it could be climbing the social or corporate ladder. That could be for some, but in the end, I just call it evolution, right?
Mm-hmm.
And, with that, with respect, communication, fidelity, loyalty, and evolution, the way the relationship, has worked with my current girlfriend, which we've been together for, 4.5 years. And the past one that I had before that is, we know that whatever happens, we're able to talk about it because she also has, the same communication. She also values communication a lot. and respect, where we both come from families that have a very, they call it punchy way of talking.
Hmm.
So we both speak very loud, and we both speak, and it sounds like we're yelling, but we're not really yelling. But even within that, we never lose respect for each other. And, we never ever attack the other person, right? Even as we're talking, and this is a very a funny inside joke with some of my like mutual friends, is that they always say like, you guys are always, you guys, they find it very funny how we talk to each other, because we're very direct, we're very straightforward, and we have like that loud punchy voice, but we're never actually, attacking the other person, and we're
Hmm.
very respectful towards each other. um, but through that, and with loyalty and fidelity, whatever roadblock that we've had so far and that we're going to continue to have, we know that we're going to talk about it, and we're going to be able to work through it, and we're not going to be attacking the other person. We're not going to, get into any like major fight, but mainly, with fidelity and loyalty. And I mean both, because you can be faithful without being loyal, and you can be loyal without being faithful.
Mm.
We know, that we're not going to break that trust that we have with each other. And through those 4.5 years, there's been, some major events in both of our lives, both together and as individuals, where we've been supportive of each other, and we've been there for each other, and that has really given me that sense, that this is the right way to go in terms of how to start, a relationship the right way, along with, friends and clients that I've had that have actually done this as well. Because if from the beginning you're seeing that your values are not aligned, you kind of can start thinking about and realizing that, hey, if things go bad, then it might not be, that this relationship will last,
Hmm.
because nothing lasts forever, right? And so even as you're going through a major positive financial, whatever, mental, healthy, emotional path, it's going to end. And what happens when that ends, right? What happens when something happens, like, you have an accident? What happens if your company goes broke? What happens if X, Y, and Z, right? When things are going great, everyone is happy, but you need to understand that it might not last that long, or it might last 20 years. But what happens with it in 20 years, right? You already have kids, have a
Hmm.
house, you have all of these responsibilities, and what happens then?
Hmm.
So with that, with those values and that shared vision of what you guys want, if those things align, I think that is what gives any relationship, the highest percentage of success rate that it could. But not a lot of people talk about it, like you said. They talk about the values, but don't really talk about the actual values they have.
Right. Right. And you know, and I think sometimes there's also, I don't know the correct terminology for this, but there's sort of like values in the cultural, political sense, maybe religious sense, and then there's like personal ethos, and th- they're both important. Um, they're both very important, and then I don't think that the personal ethos one that you were talking about, loyalty and fidelity, I don't think that that's commonly considered. I guess you could say that one is sort of more, you know, you know, cultural bigger picture values, and the other one's more like character.
Yes.
And I don't think guys are very, I really see like retarded takes all the time. I love it. I love seeing these takes because they're so funny. It really just shows how much of the manosphere is LARPing, because these guys, it's like they think that they can determine if a woman's good, she's a keeper, you know, based on simply like what her notch count is, or based on simply whether, you know, her parents were together, or based simply whether the fact that she grew up in the church. It's like, I got news for you, buddy. It's a lot of girls who got married as virgins or good little church girls, and then they get married and they immediately go and fuck a bunch of guys. And I know this from pastors. Okay, this is not like I'm not like creating it in my mind. This is something that pastors Michael Foster talks about this, right? He deals with this stuff on a practical level because they don't look at actually the girl who she is as a person. They have such poor judgment that they look at they can only look at the things around her and say that's the only way I can tell. And I'm not saying to ignore the things around her. They're important. They're all variables, right? You get like to completely invert it. There are girls that have really good character, but they grew up in a broken household. They totally divorced from culture, and she was, maybe went through a couple of years of being ran through. Now, is that girl good long-term material? Maybe. I mean, if she's really like committed to healing and you can kind of get past her past, but I mean, she's going to come with a ton of trauma and a ton of baggage from all these bad decisions. Doesn't mean that she won't be able to ultimately work through it, but don't expect this is going to be like an easy ride with a girl like this. But the point is not to say, you should do that latter one. It's just to simply convey the difference here, that you have to be able to really assess a woman, what I call on like a soul level. You have to be able to assess like, does she have a good heart? Is she kind? Is she a good person? Does she actually care about other people beyond all the other crap that she's experienced? Because a lot of women either don't or don't have enough self-awareness that it really crosses their mind. So it's like not to say that they're necessarily evil, although some women I believe are. It's like some men are. But anyway, yeah, guys just have a very hard time of looking at this stuff because you have to almost like, I don't know, it's like you gotta have your third eye open or something like that. It's like you gotta like really size up a girl in her intention in things. Not simply what she's doing, but what's her intention.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that I think that as much as a lot of people hate math or physics, in school, a lot of people never like those. It's comforting to come up with a formula or a
mhm,
list, or it's comfortable for people to say, well, 1 plus 1 always equals 2. And I think that's the reason why a lot of like these things happen, and all of this lists or whatever, the body count, or if their parents were like divorced or not, if she grew up in a broken home or not, whatever. And I think that's why a lot of people just find that comforting, because they can, in their head, it's easier for them to say, what, well, if she crosses off or he crosses off, for women, talking about guys as well, if she or he crosses off this list, then that's what I want, right? But in the end, it's not. In the end, how do you gauge, for example, emotions? How do you gauge maturity? How do you gauge, the whether they are ready or not to commit? Like, you can't really, because you can, as you said, you can have a woman that came from church that was always religious, and then just getting married, and all of a sudden she goes and cheat, or he goes and cheats, or whatever. You really can gauge that. But it's just comforting for people to follow this formulas or instructions and say, oh, okay, perfect. If I only go and find this, then I'll be happy. If I only go and do this, then I'll become this, And it's, if I only go and find a person that has exactly this list, then that's the one for me. When in reality, it's not. And I agree with what you said. I think it's I compare it to, like, one of my best friends. One of my best friends, he's actually an alcoholic, and he was an alcoholic for a long time. And right now, he's built his business. He's doing really well. He is in a committed relationship, and he's doing very well with all of that. And he hasn't had a drop of alcohol in a few years. And so I compare it, to that when it comes to, well, someone that was an alcoholic or had some kind of addiction can actually do something for himself or herself, if they are committed to the process. The problem, though, is there's not really a, I don't know, a former ex, whatever adjective you want to put it, anonymous, where women can go and say, well, yes, I'm working on this, with this group of people, and they can actually label themselves as that, as a former or a reformed, like, for example, with the whole with the whole PUA sin, right? The whole pickup sin. Like, oh, I'm a reformed PUA. I'm no longer this, but I'm a reformed PUA or whatever, right? I don't remember what the word was, but they can't really do that. And I would say, that you can find a valuable woman that used to be X or Y. I just, as you said, you have to be uh, conscious of that it's not going to be easy. That it is, going to be part of that's because there's going to be a process to that. Just like women can find guys that were X and now they're doing better, right? Like with my friend, that a girl, he found a woman that understands that he's an alcoholic. He hasn't done it in a while, but she's there to support him, and he's actually responded quite well. Speaking from a man perspective, I think he's done really well for himself. So I think that people can change, but if you are choosing consciously, to be with someone that is going through the process, know that it's not gonna be easy, and also know that you are putting yourself in that position. You're the one choosing to do so.
And I would also say I agree with all that. I'd also say that this really comes what's ignored here is the spiritual dimension to all this stuff. And you know, people create these lists because it's just like a big jerk off thing. That's really all it is. It's other guys are going to see that I have high standards because I have this list, and they think it protects them in some way. But reality is that these guys, the more these you have someone who's like obsessed with lists, they're either not get anything with women, or they are keeping them at arm's length, total hookup kind of situation. I mean, there's no emotional closeness to any women because there's always something on the list that'll give them a reason not to be. And if by any chance they happen to date a girl who checks all the boxes, they will never get her, because then it's like there's like that crack in their emotional armor, and all of a sudden it's just like the pedestal, this girl's the best, and then she leaves them, and then a new thing gets put on the list to try to like protect themselves from a girl like that. So I mean, it's all bullshit. I've worked with too many guys at this point, and you know I think that men should be aware of inputs. I don't think they should have low standards. This is not when I use notch counts as a typical kind of one, just because I think it triggers guys. I think it's good to trigger guys because it helps to, you know, get to the emotional issue here. But I'm not at all proponent of the mainstream narrative that says like, well, women can sleep with who they want. That's all bullshit. Women who are doing that kind of stuff to themselves are not respecting themselves. And every woman that I've talked to who has done that stuff, who's actually healed, one of the most key major parts of their healing process has been acknowledging that they treated themselves like shit by sleeping around with guys. And if a woman is like, if a woman slept around and she doesn't have the honesty to admit that it was self-abuse, then she didn't grow from it. She hasn't learned anything from it, and you really should stay away from her. But there's this element, this spiritual element here, which is, first off, you have your own emotional baggage, and if you're in the manosphere, you definitely do. So, you are the woman that you end up with may be somebody who holds space for you in ways that you don't quite understand. Maybe you're going to be challenged to have some compassion for her, because really it's about compassion for yourself. This is the whole thing that happens. And so you don't even know what kind of girl you're gonna fall for, but the two of you might really link up, and then you have all this baggage and shame around her past, and how it makes you feel on an ego level. I mean, these are spiritual battles, right?
Yeah.
And um, I don't. I'm not making a generalized statement that the guy needs to be with that girl or not, because it's too contextual, right? But the point is that there is so much potential growth that comes out of these things that you're being called to, rather than sit on the sideline saying, this guy isn't as good, like it's like you're a spectator, like pointing out how everybody's not perfect rather than being in the arena. And this is the last thing I just kind of want to say with all these stats and crap. You know, are you assessing yourself like your average? You can look at the stat like 9 out of 10 businesses fail. Does that mean you never start a business? Like, I'm not saying to have no conception of risk. You should, smart. But if you want to actually grow as a person, you can't run your life by the numbers, and you can't look at yourself as a statistic. I think so many guys, like, society has become so materialistic that guys, and I think this is what a lot of the stuff that goes underneath the red pill really is, which is that, we're just, dicks and pussies on some sort of, exchange. And it's like, if this is this really how you see the world? Is this really how you want to reduce things to? I just think it just shows that these people have literally zero lives, zero meaningful experience in life. And if you're a guy and you're trying to figure this stuff out, you really got to watch out, because what is even the fucking point if that's all it is? What is the point of it? You know,
Yeah.
men used to, like, you can look on a battlefield and you can say, I want to be in the safest position I can possibly be in because I don't want to get in the action. It's like, but that's not what great soldiers in the past were like. They wanted to be in the action, because even
Or
if they
live in the
died,
mountain.
that was how they expanded. That's how they grew. It's just I think it just shows how so much of the modern ethos is like the worm, and these same guys will comment on the state of modern men and not look at themselves in the mirror and see, it's like that Spider-Man meme, like, pointing at each other, the two Spider-Mans
Yeah.
at each other.
No, yeah, you touched on a lot of points there. I think that what we don't realize is that the women we're with, the woman that you're with, it's a reflection of yourself, right? And if you really get down, to the basic level, the most important part is to know yourself really well, which is something that's lost on, this generation and the new ones. Like, we don't really, there's so much stuff going on everywhere that we really never take the time to get to know ourselves, right? There's so much stuff now going on in the palm of your hand that you don't actually go out and practice a sport or practice an art or practice whatever kind of activity that will get to know you, that will help you get to know yourself a lot better. So I think that a lot of the times that's what's missing from a lot of the relationships. And I think that what gives a relationship the highest percentage of success is the same thing that will also help guys get through a breakup, which is just sit down and really start reflecting on your life, reflecting on what it is that you like, you don't like, what you want and you don't want, what your deal breakers are, and get to know yourself and actually have what you said, like that ethos in your life, right? So one of the things that, like, my ethos is build others up. That's one thing that I always keep with myself in my head, is like, I like building others up, right? So I like helping people. I like supporting people. So whether that's a friend, my dad, my girlfriend or whatever, I'm always having that thing in the back of my mind. It's not just about the values that I mentioned, but it's also about, I like building others up. So whatever happens, I know that I will be there, for someone that needs me. But I also know that I think my calling, is helping others up. And that's why, I do what I do, and that's why I'm trying, to build this social media presence. At the same time, when you start to know yourself and realize what it is that you want long term, what your deal breakers are, you stop putting up with a lot of the bullshit that's out there in the dating scene or actually in a relationship itself.
Mm.
And that's another part that it's also missing. Like, I don't think a lot of people actually sit down and write down. They might have the list of, like, well, this is what I want in a woman, this is what I want in a man, or this is what I want in a relationship. But you don't really sit down and think, well, these are the deal breakers for me completely at a deep level, because you might have them at a superficial level, but
Mhm.
not really at a deep level, and that's missing as well. And that's part of the process when you're either wanting to get into a new relationship or wanting to get past a tough breakup is, well, did I actually know what I wanted and didn't want? Did I know, what I was looking for and what my deal breakers were? No. and that's why you put up with so much of the stuff that you put up with. The other part is, taking that responsibility, as we said earlier. And that is part of taking that responsibility, sitting down and actually getting to know yourself. That's part of your responsibility. The other one is, whether you choose or not, being with that other person and having had those talks in the beginning, like it's your responsibility that you're knowing what you're getting yourself into. You should know what you're getting yourself into. At least, that does come in at a superficial level, at least in the beginning, because you don't really get to know a person deeply until you're with them for a long time. No, but at least in the beginning, having those sort of things that you want to get to know from the other person to try and gauge if you want to go further or not. That's also on you. And a lot of the things when it happens inside the relationship, I don't think humans are fundamentally bad. I think that most are fundamentally good. I do believe there are bad women. I do believe there are bad guys, but I also think that a lot of the times what happens in a relationship, the negative things that happen, has to do with people doing the best they can with what they have.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and that all comes back down to knowing yourself, taking that responsibility, evolving, getting to becoming a better version of yourself, etc. And then also having that partner that you have, in our case that woman, be a reflection of that. Because if I want to continuously become a better version of myself, I can't be with someone that values comfortness. I can't be with someone that her her highest value in life or her vision is, well, I just want to be like not do anything, be comfortable, and no, like you need to be with someone that reflects what it is that you want, that you believe in.
Yeah. No, 100%, 100% to that. It's and I'd also say for the guys who put their list out there, it's more valuable. It's valuable to have that, but it's equally valuable to have a list for yourself and how you're going to behave and how you want to act. Because if you have certain standards for yourself and you just simply mirror those standards onto a woman, maybe with the feminine, you know, corresponding ethos to it, doesn't have to be like, identical, right? But you a balanced approach to the woman based on what you're bringing to the table, rather than think like, what does she has to do this, she has to do this, she has to do this. Whenever I see too much of that, I think to myself, like, what are you doing? What are you going to be doing? Because if you're doing certain things and you actually like have that you deserve something, the reciprocation of it based on what you're bringing to the table, then you're way more likely just to draw it in. So if you have standards for yourself, you're going to have standards when it comes to the woman. At least it gives you a start to get down that direction. It's always helpful to take more responsibility if you can, because the more responsibility that you take, the better outcomes you get. Now, Oscar, there's one more question I want to ask before we close up here. We've only got a few more minutes. But with breakups, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask this. Do you feel like there are contexts when people should get back together after they've broken up? Or do you think that once a breakup happens, that's it? You guys are done. No more. No more.
That's a great question. I think that there is a possibility of getting back together, but it can't be right away. It would have to be, a process would have to have happened with both people, because in the end, it was about the two, right? There's really no way in which only one person can change and the other person can't, and then get back together. I think that whatever happened in the relationship, it was a joint effort, or a joint dismissal. And the last thing, like the reason why you guys broke up, or people break up, I think it's just like that last straw. But whatever was actually building up to that, I think was a joint effort or joint dismissal. So I do believe that you can get back together, but I would say that at least 6 months, a year need to pass, where you're going on your own, you're working on yourself, you're focusing, you're getting to know yourself better, and you're taking responsibility for yourself, and she's doing the same thing. I think that after you guys have taken a hard look at yourself and have decided that, this is what I want for my life, and this is the person that I am, and this is the person that I want to become, and you actually start talking again, after a few months, and realize that you do have, those shared values, that shared vision, you're actually working actively towards that, there is a possibility of that actually working. And the very first time that I saw that working was, have a friend that had a girlfriend in high school, and they broke up, and they didn't see each other, talk to each other for 10 years.
Mhm.
They actually, after both had relationships with other people, they found each other, at about 27, 28 years of age, started dating again. And, they've been happily married now for about 7 or 8 years. They have two daughters. They're beautiful. They still have, we are very close. So we talk a lot. And I still, to this day, ask him, hey, man, like, are you actually like really happy? And he's like, yeah, man. And this actually worked for me. And I'm like, dude, that's great. And I do think that that can happen, but you have to look at the problems that were in the relationship that made you guys break up, realize why that happened, know if that can change or not, or if you're already working, on that change. And then that way it's going to be a, what do you think? It's not a fresh start, but that way it's going to be a much more prone to success, let's call it, start when you go back. The one thing I'll say though is, even if it's not a fresh start, I do think that you need to leave everything that happened behind and take this new one as a new relationship. Because if
Mhm.
you're still having that baggage from the last one, then what was the point of changing? What was the point of that process? What was the point of, becoming better people yourselves if you're still going to have that resentment from the last time? So I do believe they can change, but it's not for everyone. It's the smaller percentage that can make it work. And the other thing is, what was I going to say? There was another part that I was thinking right now that I was building up to. Um, Oh, but there does need to be a complete, no contact time for that. Because if you keep talking to the other person, you're never really letting those feelings cool down, and you can't really see things objectively. That's, I think, the main reason for the no contact that everyone talks about, is that you're letting your emotions cool down, and so that you can look at things a little bit more logically, and that you can actually see, okay, this is what happened. This was my responsibility. This was the other person's responsibility. I did this, she did that. I didn't do this, she didn't do that. And then actually see things for what they really are. Because I'm not going to get too much into this because I know we're about to close, but because the reality is that when you break up, you have what I call the highlight reel going on in your head 24/7. So when you're actually about to break up, you might know, or you might be seeing that the relationship is negative, or you might actually be, realizing all of the bad stuff that's going on in the relationship. But once you break up, it's the damnest thing where you have this effect where all you remember are the good things. You
Yeah.
just broke up, and you could have broken up because she cheated on you, and you don't remember that part. You remember, oh, she was so nice to me. Oh, she was perfect. Oh, she was great. And that's your mind playing games on you, just because your mind wants to be comfortable and wants you to be comfortable. Your mind doesn't like change. So it wants you to remember all of the good things. So you stay there and go back to that. So that's why, I think that it could potentially work down the line, but you need to have that no contact whatsoever for at least, 6 months, to let everything cool down, look at it objectively, and then realize whether that thing that you remember was real or not, and whether that's something that you want to moving forward.
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. I mean, it whenever I've seen this stuff work, it's usually like a 5 to 10 year range of gap, because at that point you've really let them go, and you've been developing in a completely different direction, and then you run into them again, and it's like, wow, we still are really attracted to each other, but now we're more mature, and maybe some stuff that we couldn't work through together, or we didn't, we now work through separately, and now we can come back together. But when you're dealing with like just a couple of months and you've still been talking, very often what it is just, there's somebody else in the picture, and they want to jump to somebody else, because, and then, oh wait, this wasn't as good as I thought it would, so I want to come back. It's coming from fear and anxiety, and like, as you said, this highlight reel, this rationalization of, that you should be back together, rather than I actually grew, I actually changed. So yeah, it can happen, but if there hasn't been a lot of time, I'm usually pretty skeptical about the intentions behind it. Well, Oscar, thank you so much for coming on. I really do appreciate it. Where can people find you? Tell us a little bit about your services.
Okay, so right now, where people can find me, it's on Twitter. That's my main channel, and my username it's what it says right here. So it's at I am Oscar Adrian on Twitter. So if you just look at my name Oscar Adrian separately, or the username at I am Oscar Adrian, you can find me there. And usually what I do is I work with guys, specifically guys, because as a guy I know what we're going through, I know what we feel, how we think and everything. I work with guys on a one-on-one and also on a group coaching basis to help them get over a tough breakup. And the only thing though, and I want to be, I do want to be straightforward with that is, the idea is for even if down the line, the decision is made that you could get back with your ex-girlfriend, as you said, in a year, 5 years, whatever. I mainly work with guys that I want to get over that because I've found that when you work with guys that their main goal is to get back with their ex, they don't really go through the whole process.
Yeah.
And going through the whole process is, the most important part for you to grow as a person, and then also, to have healthier relationships down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they want to avoid the pain rather than try to learn from it.
Exactly.
Okay, great. Well, I'll have the links for that in the description below. You also have the newsletter. I'm going to have the link to that too. And thanks so much, man. We'll see you back on
Awesome.
Twitter.
Thank you. You too, Pat. Thanks for having me. It was great being here.
Take care, bro.